The way social media started was more of a social network, which is why we're calling ourselves a network, because we're building a way for people to connect. Right now, social media is broadcast network. So you broadcast out into the void and you hope that you get likes and you hope you get all these things. Ads go out the same way. So you're broadcasting out and you're hoping people will consume that information. We're trying to kind of flip the script a bit and kind of unravel where we've gone to be a bit more of a simpler way to connect and build relationships.
Welcome to Canada Now. I'm Ashley Smith, and every week we dig into the bold ideas, real stories, and fresh perspectives shaping Canada's future. Let's get into it. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Canada Now, the show that looks at the ideas shaping our country's future and the people bold enough to build it. I'm your host, Ashley Smith. Today, I'm joined by Jess Glowacki, founder and CEO of a proudly Canadian social media platform built to bring community back online. After more than 20 years leading engineering and product at companies like Lululemon and Reddit, Jess decided to build the platform she couldn't find, one that amplifies real voices, supports local businesses, and actually feels human. She calls herself a neighbor who refuses to settle for social feeds that forgot what social means. And I cannot wait to unpack what that looks like in practice and what it might mean for Canada's digital future. Hello, Jess. Welcome to Canada Now. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
So I do think the natural part is to just start at the beginning, and whether that means context of your professional background and what you were seeing in, the digital landscape. Maybe let's start there. Before you started building what were you seeing and what got you thinking about taking the next steps?
Yeah, I've been in tech for a long time. I started off as an engineer before kind of leading programs and things like that. And the landscape is changing, politically, and it just felt like it was time that we had something that was our own, that wasn't controlled by other people. The algorithms right now are meant to actually keep you hooked, and that's not what we want to do. We want to bring people back into the communities in the real world. So we're not trying to keep you on the app forever.
So let's dive into that. I'm just curious, even from the sort of business perspective, when you're thinking about going against that trend of hooking eyeballs, hooking users in terms of exploiting perhaps the algorithm to do so, what is the business model?
We're going algorithm free, which if you think early days Facebook, it was just people connecting, following the people you want to follow, and sort of building your own feed that way. And so we're trying to take it back to that, which does require some unlearning. And we want to make it sort of a go-to resource. So you go there if you want to find out what's happening in your city. You want to go travel to another city and you want to see what's going on there. So it really becomes that place where you can go in, see what people are talking about. We've got groups as well. So you can find local groups, you can find different communities, or just globally online. Same thing with events. Events, you can start to find local events. And then on the flip side, if you're someone who's in there who's posting, you could actually come in and say, hey, I'm playing a gig in Tofino. I'll post in that feed and put my event there so that people can find you. So we're getting back to discoverability versus ad machines that are sort of blasting information out into the void.
It sort of has me thinking a little bit more around function and practical use versus entertainment, maybe. Is that how you would say you see it?
Yeah, if you think about the way social media started was more of a social network, which is why we're calling ourselves a network, because we're building a way for people to connect. Right now, social media is broadcast network. So you broadcast out into the void and you hope that you get likes and you hope you get all these things. Ads go the same way. So you're broadcasting out and you're hoping people will consume that information. So yeah, we're trying to kind of flip the script a bit and kind of unravel where we've gone to be a bit more of a simpler way to connect and build relationships.
Tell me a little bit about growing. So as you're developing this and as you're inviting users and working, I'm assuming, with some partners, maybe corporate, what does that look like in these early stages?
Yeah. So, our idea is to partner with brands. We've got our own merch line through Black Maple Trading Co. So we're going to be doing sort of co-branded product drops for people to kind of have that sort of merch that says, hey, I've been to Canada or I'm representing Canada. And so there's a few different partnerships we have in the works that we're going to do really to kind of have more of a curated thing. So we don't want to do ad machine where you just kind of pay the money, get the ad. We want to make it for the users and we want to make it a little bit more personal. We're just trying to flip that business model to be more collaborative and really to support small businesses in Canada, artists in Canada, all these things that we can do and any feature that we want to put in will go through that lens. So we're just really trying to sort of help the Canadian economy, help tourism, just help people connect within Canada.
One of the things I noted when reviewing a bit about your ethos at A was priority around privacy and security. I mean, I think that's something that a lot of folks in tech are thinking about. Whether or not they're prioritizing it might be a different story. I think Canadians value this, but I'm not sure if they're really thinking about it day to day as they're using all of the technology that they use. What's informing you and how are you thinking about privacy and safety online right now?
Yeah. So first things first, we have the data in Canada. That's very important. And then, we're following different laws like the GDPR, different things like that to make sure that we've got the right security in place. I think one thing that goes away, which is really interesting, is that when the feed is chronological, we're actually not as prone to getting, say, hit by bots or hit by anything like that, or people trying to sort of break into the accounts, because people who post, and if it's not content people like, it'll just drop off. They're not going to get the followers. They're not going to get anything like that. So the good stuff will bubble to the top. In the current social media landscape right now with these algorithms, it can lean depending on what's happening politically. So you can start to see people who are very angry one way or very angry the other way. And then it feeds on that if you start reading that. Whereas I think what we're seeing now, at least in the early days here, is that people are coming into the app and realizing they can actually connect around non-political topics and they can just talk about their cats and their whatever they want. I mean, they can still have good conversation, but it becomes just less intense, I think, is the way to put it.
Well, I can say for sure that having played on various social platforms, over the last few years for some varying reasons, right? I think we're all there as consumers for varying reasons, whether that is to build community. I'm in some mom groups with parents who also have children with type 1 diabetes, and I'm there for a completely different thing than when I'm on another platform trying to develop my own business sort of value proposition to get a new audience, et cetera. And so I do think that what has been lost over the last, half decade at the very least, if not 10 years, is that feeling of discovery that's not purely, I don't know. I feel like when I'm there, I'm kind of trying to game the system in so many ways.
That's what everybody has to.
And so I think there is something really interesting about going back to basics to some extent and figuring out finding people that have similar interests. And I remember the early days of Foursquare for any of our younger listeners who are just that was I don't know, maybe you can speak to that geo mapping, placemaking, digital discovery. I'm using all the wrong words, I'm sure. But it's sort of those features all sort of went away. But I remember this idea of going out and trying to discover businesses and showcase that I've been there and supporting the local mom and pop shops, for example. And so I'm wondering, for those who haven't explored the A platform yet, what is it that they would expect to find logging in for the first time today?
Yeah, I think right now we've been focusing on the feeds. So when you log in, it's people chatting, people liking, and when we go in there, there's going to be the business or the model within the app is really going to be pretty core amongst all the different features where you can discover. So it can be people that you're chatting with across Canada, even internationally. We're actually getting a lot of people wanting to join internationally as well. You're going to be able to follow stuff so you can curate your own feed of things that you like, and then local. So if you tag yourself to a city in Canada, you can start to see what people are talking about in your neighborhood. The same applies across all these other features. And I think it just really, that's our initial focus, but we've got a roadmap of ideas that you wouldn't believe of how can we better provide tools for people to find small businesses, to find, local running groups, to find all these things. And just really all these features are meant to support people in the real world. So that is the whole idea behind it.
That is really interesting. So folks who are signing on from outside of Canada, are we seeing trends as to the why they're participating? Like, are they maybe thinking of traveling to the country, moving to the country, or they enjoy Canadian culture?
I think there's a number of factors.
Yeah.
I think there's a big uprising around billionaires and just the tech giants. And so people are looking for alternatives. So we know that's happening. But also, like, one thing I thought that it would be for people who are coming to visit and people who are, traveling across the country. And what I didn't realize is that there's actually like people that are Canadian living in other countries that want to come and connect with their culture, because this is a very cultural app. We're not going to ever go global. We're going to keep that culture. And later on, we may launch in another country with their own brand and their own kind of feel. And so, keeping it that tight knit sort of focus allows us to really build features that sort of fit the culture.
That makes sense. So you take the model and you put it into a new place and tweak for the nuance that makes sense there.
Yeah, or a new application. Like we could put it into some form of an educational app that could be used in schools to train kids how to use social media and what not to post and what. So there's a lot of applications that I think we could use it for, but giving it sort of its own feel and its own unique set of features that would sort of be applicable to that audience.
That opens up a few things I'm wondering about. Speaking of younger users, that's something that I think is being widely discussed, is generally around what guardrails should or should not exist around young folks using social. Especially, there's a lot of the traditional worries around predatory behavior, that sort of a thing. And now with the emergence and quick advancements of AI, the sort of additional risk that sort of comes with it. So we don't necessarily I'm not necessarily asking you this with the founder hat on but given your product design experience and the decades you've spent in tech, I know there's going to be parents listening. What sort of things are you thinking about when it comes to sort of online safety with social media in general? Things that, especially for folks who maybe aren't using social so much and maybe aren't as tapped into some of the things that, for example, their 14-year-old might be engaging with or seeing. Anything that you think is worth sharing?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if you've seen recently some of the changes that Pinterest has put in, for example, where you can actually turn off AI videos and AI photos. And so our content policy is a lot like Pinterest. So while we don't have it now, when we do build an AI model, it's going to be to support that content policy. So we're not going to, like, right now, the industry actually, and, OpenAI and Meta and a lot of those big players are removing restrictions. They're allowing things that are kind of uncomfortable. Right before the election, they removed fact checking, which, so now there's all sorts of misinformation that's kind of running rampant. And so obviously we align with Canadian values. So we want to make sure that it's not free speech. It's it's respectful and it's all that. And we can do that through AI, and with generative AI, it can learn, and then it can sort of start to say, okay, well, that's not right. Oh, if someone's changing the wording to try to get around it. And you can start to adapt that AI model. So while we're not going to use it for your feed, we want to use it to clean up the content and to block users where we need to. So it's more of a tool to make it a safe space.
Yeah, it is. It has been funny to see the sort of reversal of thinking with some of these issues, and also just the reversal of some of the guardrails within a lot of the popular apps. I will say, having spent an inordinate and in many ways unproductive amount of time on Twitter over the last few years because of some of the Web3 stuff that I was doing, to experience firsthand as a user, the unblocking, for example. You can't block users on that platform anymore. And so you don't have any control as a user how you're connecting. And in many ways, because of the way the algorithms, as you mentioned, work, that can invite like just abuse. It can invite bullying. It can invite, just a lot of the wrong things.
This idea started for me as a mission. Like it's not a money first thing. And I think as soon as a company like that large decides that it's no longer mission driven, it's money driven, then a lot of those things are you take away some of those controls, and you take, because it's about ads, it's about whatever their revenue model is, and then the safety kind of takes a back seat. And so that's not something we ever want to do. We want to make this, it's mission first, and it's supportive community, and really trying to focus on that.
I have to wonder what someone listening to you might be thinking right now when they hear you say that. I think as a mom, this really resonates. If you're a business person listening to this, you might think, okay, but what about the monetization? How do you make it work? And so I'm even thinking for the entrepreneurs that are listening, what are your thoughts on how to just generally begin a business in 2025? If you're very much driven by mission and purpose, you're clearly putting together a very scrappy, you're very in scrappy mode right now. And I'm just wondering, what does it mean to be scrappy in 2025 when you have a lot of new tools, an interesting landscape? Maybe you can be leaner than you would have been able to be 10 years ago.
Absolutely.
And so you maybe have the opportunity to be driven more by values. Anyways, I don't want to speak for you, but these are the things I'm wondering about as I'm hearing you talk.
Yeah. I mean, our revenue model is not going to be ads based, like solely. So if we do ads, for example, on the local feeds, the business has to reside in that area. So we want to tie it to things that are relevant. We want to introduce other features that might be subscription based, or, things like that can help support the communities and help you identify yourself as whatever whatever business you want to be, or whatever if you're an artist. And so money will come. It'll come through partnerships. It'll come through these kinds of features. But again, not taking our eye off of user experience first. And I think I learned that probably a lot from my time at Lululemon. Very much was everything was about how user experience, and how do we make that the best for them, and rather than being about the advertisers and about everybody else getting that money.
I'd love to know, again, sort of for the younger builders, if they're listening, do you have thoughts on how to get started, how to take your idea and take that first step?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think what I've noticed with a lot of entrepreneurs is they've got a great product idea, and they can maybe execute on it. They can get the right people in to build the product. But I think because I have so much experience on the business side, I know that has equal weight to your marketing strategy. What is your brand, and how are you becoming that trusted brand? And so there's so many other angles. You have to understand finances. You have to understand, legal. You have to understand all these different areas. So if you think of a company that's large, it's going to have so many different areas of the business. And it's really hard to get a product out there without understanding who are you marketing it to, even? Like, who are your users? And you can't be everything to everyone.
So for somebody who's wanting to go out into the real world and maybe get that firsthand experience before taking their idea to the next level and find a company that they like to work for, I'm just wondering if you have a pulse on sort of this changing landscape in terms of even the entry level job market in tech. I'm assuming you probably know a lot of people in the next generation that are coming after you. What kind of advice are you giving them to lean in and get their feet wet and get that real expertise so they know what they're sort of maybe missing?
Yeah. I mean, it's a tough market right now. I was around at the dawn of the internet. When I was first entering the job market, they couldn't get people fast enough. And then we hit early 2000s, and there was a crash, essentially, and you couldn't get jobs. The people that are open, they're curious, they want to learn, they're gonna have a better chance. So if you've taken for example, for me, you take your computer science, you've done all that, you can't just sit there and go, okay, now give me a job. You're gonna have to go, okay, well, what's happening right now in the market? What, where do I want to specialize? Is there things I need to learn? And we're in a time right now where employers kind of have their pick. And so those people who have a good attitude have a willingness to learn on their own, so motivated on their own to learn, they're going to be the ones that succeed.
I did attend some events at the 2025 Web Summit that was in Vancouver. And I think one of the, common themes is just about tech talent and business talent in Canada in general, and just how a lot of folks tend to look across, the border for opportunities just because of the businesses, that are there and the scale and the pay, clearly, and the cost of living. And of course, in the tech landscape all across North America, things are changing very quickly. But I'm wondering for Canadians, it's just really lovely, I think, to see Canadian tech companies coming up and building on their own terms. And so besides these issues we've already discussed, what kind of things are you seeing as a tech entrepreneur in Canada? And then I'm going to ask you about internships.
Yeah. I mean, I've not been in the Canadian tech industry. I mean, early on I was, but Lululemon is a retailer. So we are support. Tech is support for the retail business. When I went to Reddit, that's Silicon Valley. And it's the mentality of those companies, and why a lot of them succeed is that it's on almost like you're thinking about it 24/7. And you're thinking about, how can I be better? How can I push more? It's got to be perfect. Like, there's a lot more of that. I don't know the Canadian market, or if we are kind of doing that sort of extra push, especially when you're in the early days of doing this. I don't know if you know this, but overtime is not allowed in a lot of industries, but it is allowed in IT. That's just a regulation that they have. And so the expectation can be for a lot of especially the Silicon Valley companies is that you're available. If I call you at 8 p.m, you're available, and that's, unfortunately, that's where we're at right now. So anybody who tries to sort of time box their work or says no to some of those things, it's going to be a struggle. And that's just kind of where we are in the industry right now. And with this AI bubble, everything is speeding up.
So as you're building a company here in Canada and looking at, building out your team as you scale, how are you thinking about that experience? How are you thinking about your sort of culture as a company in terms of the workforce?
Yeah. So I spent a long time at Lululemon, and the culture there was vastly different. It was very much about connecting with people, making sure you had your rest time. We did yoga together, So I want to bring that culture into it. And I think you can still be successful because of AI. The way a lot of business folks kind of think is I can just reduce my workforce. And I'd rather have a culture of people who enjoy being there, are supported, and I think it builds a better culture. It's not one of trying to get ahead and sort of stepping on other people to do that, and just more being about, we're one team and we're building something cool, and it doesn't need to burn you out.
Right. Yeah. I have sort of a dumb, ignorant question, because I frankly hadn't thought about this before we chatted, and I just don't know what the actual landscape is like here in Canada. But when it comes to internships, just generally, do we have a culture of internships in Canada? What does that look like? What does internship even mean? And then I'd love to know if that's something you're thinking about with A.
I think that the universities and colleges and stuff like that do have intern programs, and companies can sign up to have interns, or I've been reached out to before about that. We're not big enough for that yet, but I think it's an amazing opportunity to have people come in and learn the business. You see if there's a fit, and then you can sort of go from there. I don't know what it's like in any of the Canadian tech companies, but I would definitely want to do something like that and try to support people who are early in their career as well. So making sure that we've got training, not just technical training, but leadership training, because we're preparing them to go and be a leader somewhere else. It's something that I think I got a lot of value out of when I was at Lululemon.
Yeah, that makes a big difference, I think, having that exposure and even allowing people to think a little bit beyond their current skill set and understand what the trajectory could be if they're interested. Let's come back to the platform. I first of all going to prompt everybody, if you're listening to this and you haven't signed up, please do check it out. I'll put a link in the show notes so you can learn more about the platform, but also download the app and get rolling on it. Tell me a little bit more about sort of the early days. I know that I was an early user, and I know that there were some growing pains. I saw it, and I've seen some of the iterations and the fixes, and sort of, I guess you could say, I feel like I've been a bit of a beta user in the early days, but I'm noticing a shift. And so I'd love to just know a little bit about the product side and how you see, say, Q4 of 2025 with the platform.
Yeah. I mean, I had grandiose plans for it to just, big marketing plans. That's kind of what I've worked on at other companies, and so definitely some technical issues at the beginning. But you know what? Those are opportunities. They're opportunities to connect with your users, to have them be a part of this and grow with you. And so I'm not afraid of those kind of technical challenges. It's just more around, how do you manage those? How do you build that rapport with your user base? And so we started off prior to launch by teaser videos and just fun videos and stuff on different social platforms. What I've really found that works is connecting with people actually on Threads. That's been our sort of primary broadcast channel to say, hey, we've got a new release, or we've got something out there, and come grab your friends and join. And so I think like you said earlier, different social platforms are useful for different things. And this one's been really good for connecting. And so, yes, that's sort of what I've been focusing on, is just getting people in it, getting people knowing about it, brand awareness. And as we go into Q4, we've got some partnership things that we're working on that will be pretty neat. Just look at some, obviously we've got a revenue, so we've got to do some features that obviously are supportive of that. Yeah, just kind of build. I've got so many plans. It's ridiculous. And so it's just a matter of sort of getting there. And then obviously funding. So we're currently unfunded. We're going to be prepping for our first funding round coming up here. In the meantime, getting the revenue features that will help us sort of continue on.
So if I wanted to be an early user, and I mean, for anyone that's spent any time on social, there's a lot of advantage to being an early user. Like, you get a much wider audience set in terms of, like, if you're posting, there's not a lot of people. You're starting at the ground up. So if you're creating content or participating, you have a higher likelihood of creating strong community and engagement early on. You kind of get that benefit. So if I was, for example, a small business owner somewhere in Canada, how would you think about coming onto the platform and engaging in a meaningful way in these earlier days?
What I would say is, come in and just start to sort of connect with people. Right now, there's a bit of a hesitancy. Like, people are not loving just coming on and saying, I'm selling this thing, or I'm doing this. We will have some features in the near future that will help to identify them as small business and make sure that they have the proper channels to be able to promote their work. And so really, like, I think with any small business, it's really trying to find your people and find those, create groups if that helps, and sort of promote the group that you might want to be starting. And so, yeah, I think it's just a matter of kind of getting in there, like you said, smaller audience, so you can start to engage, but know that it's not always about posting and promoting your product. You can actually switch it up with just, connecting on similar interests, or, building a rapport with people, so that when you do say, hey, I also sell this thing, or even services as well, then it becomes an easier conversion.
Yeah. So just, and correct me anywhere I'm wrong. So, but on the platform, there are ways to create communities. So where, rather than just having a primary feed, then there's also a way to have like a curated community based around interests, as an example. So in many ways, I think we're used to that idea of like groups on, say, Facebook, for example, let's talk to our old school people here. But like, my background's in real estate. You want to create some sort of like community group or real estate group on Facebook. There's like 100 of them already. And so there are ways, I think, to go in and, like you said, so if I, for example, owned an art gallery, I could go in and create a group or community around art and just start celebrating art and artists and being the host in many ways of that community, like being the person that set the stage, set the tone, and just be involved. And I think that that's a really interesting feature, is to be able to see where are the gaps, where are you interested in participating, or frankly, just going in and engaging and participating and not necessarily being the one creating that space if one maybe already exists. So I do think that's I want to play more around with that. Even like say podcasting, like there's lots of things you can create interest groups and actually talk to people and not be reliant on that algorithm to feed you, because sometimes it feeds you things you want but don't want. That's how distraction happens. That's how rabbit holes happen.
It is. Yes. Yes. I'm guilty of going down a few of those myself, and they're terrifying actually, because they can really build up your paranoia around the world, around what's happening. And you find yourself going down this hole of, well, wait, like I'm safe where I am right now. There's so much going on in the world that is unsafe. And so I'm finding myself getting like, oh my God, I've got to lock my doors. And it's like coming back to the real world and going, no, like I can go outside for a walk. I can go do whatever I need. And you really need to force yourself to do that with the algorithms right now.
Yeah. I am wondering a little bit about that. I've kind of intentionally tried to skip it, but with this Sora 2 stuff, all this AI generated video stuff that's happening, I'm finding that I'm questioning everything I'm seeing now, which is not a fun experience. I think it's good and healthy that I'm trying to
have critical thinking, or
have that critical lens as I'm looking at content. But then I feel like suddenly now it's work. Like rather than feeling like I'm discovering something, I feel like I'm trying to navigate, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I think we can all sit for days and talk about the pros and cons of AI and all the good things and all the bad things. But I am wondering, as someone that's building a platform where there's going to be video and images, how are you thinking about that component that you don't necessarily control?
First of all, AI, any kind of technology, can be used in the right hands in a good way, in the wrong hands in a bad way. Doesn't matter what it is. What I expect is going to happen is that even if I don't put any kind of controls around AI generated content, it won't get any likes. And it's going to just die off. And they're going to realize they're not getting any followers. And so they may try for a few weeks. And if it's not working, they're going to have to change their behavior. And so this is a retraining of finding the things that are good and connecting and following those and helping bolster the things that you support versus blocking the things you don't like. So you're almost flipping that script.
And so I'm just curious about mechanisms to be able to, let's just say a user, not a creator, but just a consumer of the content, how maybe to be navigating social and thinking about questioning if something is real or not real. Because sometimes the AI generated content, like there's the slop, there's the stuff that's like clearly just meant to hold you and you realize it and you're like, okay, time to move on. And sometimes it is engaging and you don't know necessarily that it is AI generated. And I'm just thinking more and more about how do I put mechanisms in place so I'm realizing it?
Yeah.
If it matters.
Yeah. I mean, I think if it's something that it's not harmful, it's not changing, if it's, really nice, beautiful art. I mean, it sucks for artists, but you might say, okay, that's kind of nice. I like that. It's when it starts to twist facts that it becomes scary, or, with sort of these human-like things. And even if we are to put, and we can, like we'll put stuff in place to try to detect it, just like Pinterest is doing. But you want to read the comments. You want to see if you've seen it once, do you see it again? Is it, and then you have to kind of fact check, and don't trust ChatGPT because it's spitting out what it's consumed. So the data it's consumed. Again, if that data is going in bad, it's coming out bad. And so you have to question, just like when you're using ChatGPT, you're like, that doesn't sound right. And you can say to it, that doesn't sound right. And it'll be like, oh, sorry. And so it all comes back to critical thinking, I think. And it's so important to go, does that make logical sense to me?
No, I think it does speak to, depending on the type of user you are of social, what you're hoping to get out of it. And I think what I'm hearing about in terms of where it is, but where you're hoping to take it, is creating more of a community hub, a place where people are engaging. So regardless of the content that's coming from the folks, if the real people are engaging in real ways, some of this stuff in some ways might be slightly less, I don't want to say relevant, but a little bit less than some of the other platforms where it's algorithms feeding you.
Yeah, people won't engage in things that don't seem real. They get fed to you through the current algorithms because it generates engagement. So we're not generating that engagement. We're saying you engage if you want to. And if not, then people will just change their behavior or go to another platform.
So the next chapter, if you could like wave your wand and look, let's say 24 months ahead, and you've accomplished a lot of the things that you're hoping to do with what would it look like? Like, what would the experience feel like? And who's there? What are they doing?
I want it to be a place of celebration and a place of support for people, and not a place of anger and complaining and things like that. And I think that will naturally happen. One thing I haven't mentioned is we want to open a foundation. So giving back to these communities and having ways for us to support and recognize supportive behavior. And so I think that's something that's going to be, it's very huge on my mind. It's not about money for me, like I said. It will come and we can deal with it, but I'm not aiming to be a billionaire. That makes sense. I just want to kind of do something that's good in the world and hopefully sort of inspire some positive change.
I love to hear it. I think that it speaks to something a lot of us are feeling in terms of a gap. I'm wondering if there's anything else. Like if for example, there's people listening and they want to support your initiatives, or if they want to partner with you, or they want to stay in touch with knowing when internships become available, for example, like how should people be following along, and how should people reach out to you to explore opportunities that might be available today?
Yeah. Our website, if you put the link in there, we've got a contact form for partnerships or other kind of inquiries that we can definitely talk through. We have an email list that you can access when you sign up. You can add yourself there or just on the website, and we'll make sure that we keep people in touch with what's going on. We'll be on Threads for a while we build this user base, but my hope is that I'm not on Threads in the next 24 months, and just really want to see that sort of community grow, and feedback is welcome too. We have an official feedback group in the app. So if there's things that you'd like to see or anything like that, we'll try to monitor that. And but yeah, the email is always a good one, just because it's queued and we can kind of go through them and get back to people.
I'm glad you brought that up. I meant to actually mention that. That is another advantage if you're the type that likes to share feedback, that being a participant in early days can be really rewarding, because if you're using the product sincerely and you really want to see it grow and build, then you can provide feedback that might be very helpful, and then get to see the features you're not seeing maybe anywhere else. So that's really cool. I am curious, when you talk about partners, is there any special type of like partner or partnership or something you are looking for or that you think is valuable in partnerships that might be worth saying out loud?
It's really is just like, I'm happy to do sort of co-branded partnerships to sort of help boost both brands together. Partnerships are always fluid anyway. It could be any sort of partnership, but what I want to do is help promote Canadian products and Canadian things. And there's going to be tourists in the app and people that are from outside of Canada too that want to see these. And so, yeah, I think the shape of it depends on what the company or people are doing. I'm always willing to have a conversation. In early days especially, it's just like, is there something that can kind of help both brands that, we can partner on? It can be anything really simple, from just like highlighting a brand in the app or reposting something, to something a little bit more of like a revenue share. It really just depends on what both parties want out of it.
I do think that also speaks to just the playbook and how it's changing, and how as a founder you have a lot of capacity to decide on like where you want to go, who you want to work with. And I think that's a really cool takeaway for folks who are listening, that building your own thing, you get to build what you want.
Kind of weird.
Yeah.
Being honest. Yeah.
Well, I think it's very exciting. As soon as I heard about the platform, I was pumped because I am one of these folks, like I'm online way too much, but I have been looking for a new vibe. And so I appreciate what you're seeking to build here. And I really hope and would implore everybody that's listening to check it out, sign up and stay with it and see how the platform evolves, particularly over the next year, and get out and support those Canadian businesses and Canadian makers. I think it's a really cool opportunity to be able to find people through the noise that we live in. So Jess, I wish you the best. And I hope we have like a second conversation in person. And yes, everyone check out all the socials and links that I'm going to put in the show notes. And I'm wondering, not to put you on the spot, but just any parting words, anything that maybe you're most optimistic about for the year ahead?
I think we're on the right path. I think, just with the way the world is working, I think that there's a lot of Canadians that are stepping up in their own way. Like, not everybody's a protester, not everybody's a boycotter, and that's okay. But if you can kind of just like, what can I do that will help? It's all going to contribute to us, having a really strong economy and culture.
Perfect. What a way to end it. Thank you so much, Jess. I really appreciate it. And everybody else, thank you for listening. Tune in again next week. Canada Now.